Hey everyone, welcome to Encounters USA. If it's aliens, UFOs, Bigfoot, or dogmen you're looking for, you came to the right place. Now listen up as we listen to some of the latest encounters. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Encounters USA. I'm your host, author Matthew Hines. Today we have an incredible show for you, and we are waiting for our co-host, Tony Z, to log in on Zoom. So hopefully that will happen soon. But if not, we need to move ahead because, as they say, the show must go on. And so that's what we are going to do now so that we can get this podcast out to you guys before the 4th of July so you can listen to it while you're sitting around the campfire. And let me tell you guys, this one, it's really, really scary. Now, another thing that was scary was that Diet, our remote viewer, could not make the show today also because of a scheduling conflict, and it's not her fault, it's mine. And we really are going to miss her because we are doing a follow-up on the Rich Germo encounters that occurred at Harstein Island and near Lake Cushman in Washington State. So we're going to use her remote viewing experiences, and I kind of got a little bit of information from her about a remote viewing she did that we're going to talk about in a minute. But for right now, we just want to say thanks to all you guys. We've really picked up a lot of subscribers, and it's just awesome because it's really nice to know that you guys are interested. And if you're listening to the podcast and you haven't subscribed, please don't forget to ring the bell so you know when we have this new content out. If you're new to Encounters USA, what do? Well, we go out looking for the things you don't want to find. We are looking for, and not personally, I'm not out looking for any of this stuff. We're looking for encounters. We are gathering information about encounters with aliens, encounters with UFOs, Bigfoot, and of course, our old friend, Dogman. So if you have any of these encounters, please send us an email at encountersusa1@gmail.com. We really want to hear it. And if you want to be on the podcast, we'll do everything to protect your privacy. You can send an email a story, or do the full Monty and come on our YouTube channel. So that's what we're going to hopefully be doing soon. But today we're going to follow up with our Rich Germo encounter, and I want to just get Diet, as I said, couldn't make it, but I want to do Diet's remote viewing here very quickly. Now, let me explain, if you don't know what remote viewing is, it is, and I'm sorry, this is not a podcast about remote viewing. It's not psychic. It is something that supposedly we all have this ability, but it is where a conscious person just basically writes down their first impression of something. And what it is, it's called a target. So how did this work? I had 5 targets, and how I selected the target from, I selected 4 targets from the video where I was with Rich Germo, where he actually walked me through the places where he had encounters with these Bigfoot creatures. Now, so I picked out 4, and then the 5th one, as a lark, it was one that I took, but it was one that I took when I was not with Rich. I was in the same location, but it was earlier when I just had found something that I just had really confused me. So that's what I sent. So that's what I wanted remote viewed. So what I did is I went to random.org, and for each picture, I randomly generated a number. Now, I didn't send the pictures to Diet. I sent her the numbers that were randomly generated by random.org and assigning the pictures. Now, with the pictures, I made sure, because I was at the location, and I made sure, because I wanted to give her all the benefit of my psychic connection, because I'd taken the pictures. I knew a lot about the place. It was ingrained in my brain. So I made sure that I consciously thought about that picture as I assigned the number. So with all of that, she didn't have time to remote view all of the pictures. And so we're going to, maybe later on, we will do a podcast with her where we talk about, these encounters. But right now, we're just going to talk about one picture that she remote viewed. And that picture was one that I just put in as a lark. I just had taken it when I was not with Rich Germeau, and it had confused me, because the backstory is I had come out of the place where I thought he had his encounter. It's very thick brush, and it is very easy to see cars going back and forth on the road. And while I was back there, I think I had seen one car going the other way, but I hadn't really noticed anything coming in the other direction. And then my wife had been up there at the same time. So when I walked out of the spot, and this is also in the Harstein Island video, which you can see on YouTube, and you can listen to it in the podcast. I'm not sure if I did a podcast about that. So anyway, I came out of the brush, and here's some shrubbery laying in the road. So I took a picture of it, because I didn't know where that had come from. I don't know who would have, it seemed like the same shrubbery from where I had just come from. And I just, to me, felt like somebody just went and picked that. And it was a big bundle. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the picture, or if you've seen the podcast, you know what I'm talking about. This is a pretty sizable bundle of shrubbery. And to me, because it really almost takes up the whole lane. And if, I was walking down the road, there's no cars on it. So I'm walking down the road, and I'm going, who put this here? What is why would somebody get in my path? Why would somebody try to make me walk out of the way of the shrubbery? So that's the backstory. So I sent her the number of the picture. And if you want to know, the number was 81. And this is what she got from 81. If it helps in the viewing, I was really drawn to this coastal area. Also, she has not seen any of these videos, as far as I know. She's not seen any of these videos. So all she has seen is these pictures of basically forest areas. So again, if it helps in the viewing, I was really drawn to this coastal area. It looks like it was water area by some trees. It was late at night. I just kept seeing darkness. I felt like I was flying in some type of helicopter type thing. There's metal everywhere around me. I felt there were two subjects, a male and a female. I felt like the male was the pilot. The female was a little more unclear. All I remember was there was no emotional intelligence. She felt very cold. I felt like they were being drawn to the minerals in the area. And there was also something in the water that they were on a mission for. Now, if you're looking at remote viewing, of course, she has no information other than she has the number 81, and that's all she's going by. But there's a lot of very interesting things about her. I almost want to say an interpretation. And the first thing that I want to point out is that I kept asking the question is, how are these? Oh, also, before you completely scoff, is that there were two subjects, a male and a female. Rich Germeau says there was a big one, and he thinks the other one was smaller, and he thinks that one was a female. I've had another remote view this area, And actually, she remote viewed another object from the first investigation I did, and she also said there were two a male and a female creatures. Now, there's metal everywhere around me. I kept asking, how are these things getting on and off of this island? And I even asked Rich Germeau, I asked him, and he seems to think they migrate off the island, and part of which was by swimming. So with the female, it was a little more unclear. There was no emotional intelligence. She felt very cold. So maybe I don't know, but maybe she's just that's kind of a maybe that's the Bigfoot family unit. She's just there for the ride, and she's with her men, and that's all she really cares about. Now, they were being drawn to the minerals in the area, and there was something in the water they were on a mission for. So you can, I'll go ahead and post this in the comments section so that you can look at it yourself. But, like Einstein said, everything's a miracle or it isn't. But to me, just the fact that she was able to pick out that there were two creatures involved, she had nothing but a number. And there were two individuals involved. And, maybe somebody was driving along and that thing fell out. Maybe that's the people who left the thing. Maybe it was inadvertent. Maybe it fell out of something. I didn't hear anything go by, as I said. I just don't know what, how she could have figured that out. Of course, that it was not, she's talking about the darkness, and she's talking about a helicopter. So, again, you make of it what you want, but that is her interpretation of a picture of bushes in the road, and it kind of supports what Rich says. And I'm not going to say anything more than that, because we want to keep this podcast as scientific as possible, but the coincidences are amazing. All right. So today, guys, we're going to be talking about Olympic Mountain Bigfoot encounters. Now, if you don't know where the Olympic Mountains are, I'll show you a map. I'll show you the Google map on the podcast or on the YouTube channel. But the Olympic Mountains are basically, if you look at the continental United States, the Olympic Mountains are the very tippy northwest corner of the U.S. Now, if you've never been to the Olympics, which seeing the number of people, 3.3 million people in 2016. What are those people doing there? Visited the Olympics anyway. I'm sure they're all coming from Seattle. A lot of them are coming from Seattle, but 3.3 million people. Are those mountains that big? All right. So the terrain of the Olympics is also something that you have to take in counter when we start to talk about Bigfoot in the Olympics and these missing 411 people. The terrain of the Olympics, and if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you have the advantage of seeing the pictures that I've taken myself of the Olympics. I spent a lot of time there. They are very, very rugged. They are basically straight up, straight down kind of deals. The only way to really get around is in the river valleys, unless you like hiking up and down hills. But remember also, the vegetation in the Olympics is very dense. You have on the western side, on the Pacific side, you have the rainforest. So you're walking through basically a tropical jungle, and it's not like a jungle you can machete through. There is all kinds of dead stuff and ferns and things, and it's really pretty much impassable terrain for a basic human being. So everything is channeled to what Rich Germeau called, I think he called water approaches, but you really have to follow the rivers in order to be able to navigate, unless well, like I said, it's not really possible. And, even the trails there are basically made from game trails of deer and elk and whatnot. And they travel along the same paths and also are pretty much limited to the rivers, especially in the winter. Now, in the winter, the higher elevation of the Olympics, and we're talking maybe the upper third, is covered in snow. The lower two-thirds generally, because it's the northwest or northwest, generally just rain and drizzly, miserable cold, like the rest of the northwest, at least on the Pacific side. So it's the kind of terrain, when you want to talk about it, that if you think about it, if you were a creature living, out in, a place where you want to stay hidden, except for being in a place where there's a lot of snow, which may not even be as good. Well, actually, it wouldn't be as good. If you want to stay hidden, there are not very many places that really can compete with the Western Cascades and, going all up and down the Oregon and Washington coast. Why is that? Because the rain, if you've ever walked in the rain in a forest, it's very loud. Those raindrops falling on things, falling on you, they make a lot of noise. And so if something wants to stay hidden, that is and move around, that is certainly one good way to do it. The other thing is, without being able to see because of the low visibility, because of the clouds bringing in the rain, then it's also very hard to bring in aircraft to spot these Bigfoots or these creatures. Now, the Northwest has 4 seasons. All of them have rain, but during the summer, from the end of June to pretty much August and almost into the second week of September, it's very hot and very sunny, and it's some of the best weather in the Northwest. But beyond that, the weather is very miserable, and people make the mistake of coming up here in the summer and buying property, and then when the winter sets in, they just go, oh my gosh. So the weather here is very depressing, and it's conducive to our Bigfoot, but it's also conducive to people disappearing. Now, what goes on in these Olympic Mountains professionally? Well, of course, there's logging, but also there is also obviously the tourism industry is obviously a multi-billion. 3.3 million people in 2016. So obviously the parks are the Sol Duck Hot Springs, the camping, the campgrounds, the recreation areas, the hiking, all those people, they're all spending a lot of money. So that interest is definitely going to compete with your logging interest. And then, there's other things like, and also want to talk about the towns, because we, on Bigfoot Politics, which you can see on the Rich Germeau interviews when we talked about the politics of missing people, there are 4 major towns around the Olympic Peninsula. The first one and the biggest one is Port Angeles. The second one is Sequim, which used to be very small and where I came from, where I grew up. And the third one would probably be, I'd have to give it Shelton, down where one of these disappearances took place. So it's, I hope that was, so we've got Forks, we've got Shelton, Sequim, and Port Angeles. So those 4 towns are not big towns, and they surround the Olympics. And as you'll see, that these are the towns where the search and rescue and the police are called in order to search for the missing people. All right. Now, with that background, let's go ahead and start talking about first. Let's start talking about missing people. Now, as we're going through this list of missing people, we want, if families are listening, we're very sorry that this has happened. And I think that it does a family more justice to say that, there is a real explanation instead of they just disappeared. Because if you tell a family that these people there's no suspect or whatever, and they're just gone, you lead them, they keep thinking something's going to come back. And if at least they have the option to say, well, there's also these creatures out there that sometimes they can be very territorial, then it doesn't do the family any good to sit there and have to suffer for so many years without looking at another likely suspect, all for the sake of tourism and logging. And also because of the ha-ha factor that the U.S. government has created in associating these things with aliens and UFOs. Not so much Dogman yet. So, and as we talk about these people, just remember and keep them in your hearts and prayers. And if you're out, keep a lookout for them. Remember the names. And I can't show you the pictures, but try to remember the names and look for the pictures and try to keep these people in your hearts and minds. And also don't make any of the mistakes that they made. So let's go to case number one. These two cases, the one I'm going to talk about here and the one I'm going to talk about down by Lake Cushman, these are in David Paulides' 411 books. So these stories are based out of the Peninsula Daily News, which is the Port Angeles newspaper. So the story that I took it from is, why is there no basic rescue team? Why is there no procedure for people who go missing in these areas? And so the first one that they discuss is Jacob Gray. Jacob Gray was a 22-year-old hiker, and Jacob Gray left Port Townsend the day before April 6th. He was on his bicycle, and he had camping equipment, and those things were found on the side of the road on Solduck Hot Springs Road. And that's it. They were found on the side of the road. So the first thing that we need to look at this is, well, what are the likely suspects? And my first inclination before I start blaming Bigfoot is that, well, if it happened on the side of the road, a vehicle was most likely involved. And beyond that, I cannot say anything else, but I'll finish reading this story. And the rest of the story goes like this. Rangers performed a hasty search, a quick reconnaissance of the area, April 6th and 7th, and found no trace of Jacob. Olympic Mountain Rescue joined the search on the afternoon of April 11th. The park had moved to a limited, continuous search on April 14th, meaning the park is no longer actively looking for Gray. Clallam County Search and Rescue led a search with about 30 people and scent and cadaver dogs on April 15th, but did not find Gray. Gray's father, Randy Gray, continued to search the area around the Solduck River after the park scaled back its efforts. Randy, who recently returned to his home in Santa Cruz, California, said he was shocked to find the Olympic National Park did not have a written procedure that would help rangers find his son. It's shocking that such a big place doesn't have protocol to do search and rescue, he said Friday. I don't want anybody else to go through what we're going through right now. He called it irresponsible for the park, which reported an estimated 3,390,221 visits in 2016, to not have a written search and rescue plan. Now, as I said again, what is the likelihood that Bigfoot had something to do with this? Well, the only thing that we can say is that our friend, our missing companion, Jacob Gray, a 22-year-old hiker, just disappeared into thin air. That was at Solduck Hot Springs. Now, in the same year, another disappearance took place. Now, this disappearance hits a little more close to home because the Solduck Hot Springs are on the North Pacific, or it's called the Strait of Juan de Fuca, but they are on the northern Pacific side of Washington State. To get to this next encounter or this next disappearance, we have to go across the Olympic Mountains southeast, heading towards the capital of Olympia as the crow flies. And then we end up at a place called Lake Cushman, which is on the southeast but the southeast portion of the Olympic Mountains. Very rugged area. Now, this place has a history that we're going to talk about, but Zack Krull, who was 20 years old, was reported missing on April 10th. Now, if we go back to Jacob Gray disappeared on April 6th. And Zack Krull disappeared on the other side of the Olympics on April 10th, 4 days later. He was reported April 10th to the Mason County's Sheriff's Office as missing after he was overdue from a camping trip near Staircase Campground. Searchers found tracks heading into an area hit by an avalanche. Krull's family told the PDN that Mason County Sheriff's Office, Olympic Mountain Rescue, and Mason, Thurston, and Pierce County search and rescue units did everything they could to find Krull. Some 70 searchers, tracking dogs, and helicopters combed the hills around Lake Cushman in an effort to find Krull. The search was scaled back about a week after he was reported missing. Searchers said they found tracks leading to an area that had been hit by an avalanche. So, another missing person. And what we're going to talk about now is we're going to talk about some peculiar facts about this area where this young man, this Zack Krull, just 20 years old, was reported missing. But before we do that, because we're going to come back to Lake Cushman, we need to go back to and look at a couple of more disappearances that happened around this area. The next one I want to look at is the disappearance of Brian Lee Johnston in 2013. His truck was found at the Ozette Trailhead. According to Pacific Daily News Archives, at least 3 other people, John Devine of Sequim, Gilbert Gilman of Olympia, and Stephen Bissert, a German exchange student, have disappeared in the Olympic National Park in 30 years. So let's look at some of our possible suspects before we look at the cases of Gilbert Mark Gilman and our other, no, I think we're just going to, and John Devine. Yeah, we're going to look at John Devine and we're going to look at Gilbert Gilman. But first of all, let's look at an encounter that happened out in Lake Ozette. June or July 1984, Washington. We got up at 6 and went on the day trip at about 8. Our camp was located just south of Ozette Island, approximately 719348. We spent approximately 3 to 4 hours at Cape Alava, so somebody can do the math and figure out the approximate time. It was light, however. Month would have been anywhere from late June to mid or late July, 1984. Location, USA, Washington State, Clallam County, Ozette area. Observed. I was on a summer school field trip, 12-day hike, with both teachers and high school students from my district. As memory serves, it was 5 or 6 teachers and about 20 or 30 teenagers. We were split up into 2 groups and coming back to our initial camp from a day trip to Cape Alava, where we were doing a biological exploration of the tide pools and area. I was in the lead group of about half the kids, with I think 2 of the teachers. The second group was approximately 1/2 to 1 mile behind us. I can't recall the distance of them well. Our group crossed a small stream that came out of the tree line about 50 to 75 meters from the water line. I remember the stream being too big to jump across, but not very deep, only to just below the tops of my Rachley hiking boots. After we had waded the stream and walked/ran about another 300 meters down the beach, we were told to wait by one of the teachers. I remember stopping and turning around to wait for the rest of my group with a couple more kids. As we were waiting and watching, a black, hairy, bipedal creature emerged from the tree line at the stream. The creature was large in mass, but I am unsure of height, as the creature was partially bent over and reaching sporadically into the stream. We shouted to look at the thing to our group. As the group stopped and turned, we ran back maybe 20 feet to rejoin the group. As we all stood there and watched, the creature came about half the distance of the stream towards the ocean, still looking and reaching into the river. While this was occurring, something started to whine, as in fear, and the teachers with us began saying, "Calm down, it's not what you think. Just relax. We know what you're thinking, but trust us, it's not. Just calm down." Nobody up to this point had said the word Bigfoot yet, but then, as I remember, someone saw the other group way down the beach and tried to shout a warning to them. They yelled, "Look, Bigfoot!" At this point, the creature stood straight up and looked directly at us for a few quick steps. For a few quick seconds, I was so scared that I do not remember how tall it was, only that I have the impression of a very tall creature. It then turned to its left and strode back into the woodline. I do not know how many steps it took because, once again, I was very frightened. The other group started to run towards us, and our group started to go towards them until our teacher stopped us and made us wait there. One teacher went to the creek and met the other teachers that were in the second group there. One of the second group teachers herded the rest of the kids to us, where we were all now very excited and wanted to go check the scene out. The second group of kids all complained of a slight stench in the stream, but none of our group smelled anything. There were either 3 or 4 teachers now conferring at the scene, with 2 waiting with us. When the other teachers came back, they said that what we saw was not Bigfoot, but just a black man who was camping in the tree line. They said that he was naked, and that's why he was all black. I remember someone asking if they had talked to this man, and we were all told to ignore it, forget about it, and just plain drop the subject. All the teachers then started to really sell the black man story. But we were not allowed to go and see him for ourselves. Only a few of us kids believed this at all, and this was the start of a few other incidents that happened to us along the way. So we have a disappearance of a young man in the Lake Ozette area in 2013. And then, according to the story, we have evidence that there is a Bigfoot creature there in 1984, along with Officer Germeau's encounter in 2008. Or actually, his encounter was 2000, the year 2000, at Nia Bay, or I'm sorry, at La Push, just down the coast. So right here we have somebody who just disappeared and they search was up and down this beach that we were just reading about, and they never found Brian Johnston. All right, poor young man disappeared in 2013. All right, so the Johnston and again Randy. I just want to make sure that we get this Jacob Gray. So Johnson and Jacob Gray disappeared out on the very western edge of the Olympic Mountains. Now we're going to go back to the southeast, and we're going to look at the case of Zack Krull, which we've already talked about, and we're also going to talk about another individual named Gilbert Mark Gilman. Now, let's talk about Gilbert Mark Gilman. Now, I'm just going to read this from you directly this is from strangeoutdoors.com. Gilbert Mark Gilman disappeared June 24, 2006, Olympic National Park, Washington State. Gilbert Mark Gilman, 47, went on a visit to the Olympic National Park in Washington on June 24, 2006. He was spotted by a park ranger, Sandy Lustig, carrying a camera but not a backpack, and was wearing a bright green Hawaiian-style floral shirt and khaki shorts with flip-flops. Lustig had asked him to turn down his music in his convertible car. Given his attire that day, it seemed he was going for more of a stroll and opportunities to take photos in the park rather than a serious hike. You don't wear flip-flops on a multi-mile hike. He was described as healthy and athletic, but he was nearly blind without his glasses. This was the last time anyone saw him alive. Gilman was a tough guy. He was a U.S. Army paratrooper and had served military duty in Panama, East Africa, and Israel. He had combat experience with the 82nd Airborne and received 2 Bronze Stars. He also had degrees from the London School of Economics, Union College in New York, and Solvay Business School in Brussels. So he had brains as well as brawn. He also worked as a civilian contractor for a year in Iraq and was an interrogator fluent in Arabic, Russian, and Chinese. Gilbert worked for the UN before he came to Washington State to manage the 2004 congressional campaign for Sandy Matheson, director of the State Department of Retirement Systems. He worked under Matheson as deputy director of the Retirement Systems Department since April 2005, advising her on national and local pension issues. He was supposed to accompany Sandy to a meeting in Spokane, Washington on Sunday, June 25, 2006, the day after he set out for his visit to the park. When he failed to show up originally as planned, people started getting worried. Gilman was reported missing that day. Gilman's vehicle, a 2005 Ford Thunderbird convertible, was found at the Staircase Ranger Station. Searchers spent 10 days looking for any clue of Gilbert in the Staircase area and examined nearby trails and ridges in the area, which include steep, rocky hills, dense forest, and the North Fork Skokomish River, and found no trace of him. They used tracking dogs, helicopter, and a plane equipped with heat-seeking equipment, along with 62 searchers on the ground. After 10 days of fruitless searching, he was declared lost by the U.S. Forest Service. What happened to Gilbert Gilman that day as he took photos in the Olympic National Park Staircase Loop Trail? So there we have yet another disappearance in the Lake Cushman area. 2 disappearances in a very short time. Now, if you haven't seen Bigfoot Politics, my interview with Rich Germeau, how we talk about why nobody is mentioning the fact that these creatures could be a suspect, and why I'm saying that, I'll talk to you about in a minute, but we specifically talk about that, and Rich Germeau gives the best answer that I've heard so far. All right, so let's talk about the Bigfoot, or the Olympic Bigfoot Project. And I'm sorry, it's called the Olympic Project. It's the Olympic Project, but they are investigating Bigfoot. Now, the Bigfoot Project was started by, I want to make sure we get this name right, Derek. I want to make sure I get this name right. Oh, I'm looking at the website right now, and I'm just, it's Derek Randalls. I know it is, but I just want to make sure that I say that right, because I hate when I get names wrong, and I'm sure they would hate it too. But I am sure that it is Derek Randalls who started the project. And the reason that this is important is because he was hiking up the Staircase Trail. And he had gone, I've never been up the trail myself, but I think that he had actually hiked to the top. And at the top, it was getting close to the evening. He and some other people were basically chased off by some Bigfoot creatures. And I think that he believes there was more than one, and they were forced to basically retreat down the mountain more. So you have this Derek Randall's account, and you also have the Rich Germeau account. He was putting up cameras around Lake Cushman, for these property owners who said that they had constant encounters with these creatures. And then suddenly these people end up missing at this particular area. 2 people have ended up missing, but not one person, not one mention of, could this possibly be maybe the Sasquatch? Because there's definitely there's a police officer who has evidence of them being there. There's other investigators that have evidence of them being there. Randall, I'm sorry if I don't get this right, but Derek, these guys have amazing trail cam footage on their website at olympicproject.com. So there's all kinds of evidence that these creatures are up there, and then we have missing people. Now, the last person that I want to talk about is a person named John Devine, whose disappearance sits a little bit closer to home for me because he is from where I grew up, and he disappeared on, I guess, November 22nd. Oh, I'm sorry. He disappeared in 1997 on September 7th. So let me talk a little bit about the weather, since we haven't really talked about that since we started this in September, because we did talk before about how the months of late June to middle September are basically very nice. They're generally hot and very little rain during those months. But come September, especially September 7th, if you're hiking up in the higher elevations, things are looking for food. Winter's coming in. So I'm not saying that has anything to do with this, but here is the account, and this account is taken from strangeoutdoors.com. John Devine disappeared September 7th, 1997, Olympic National Park, Washington State. John Devine was a 73-year-old hiker who lived in Sequim and visited the Olympic National Park in Washington on September 7th, 1997. He was said to be an experienced hiker and had intended to go to climb 6,796-foot high Mount Baldy in the Olympic National Forest using the extremely steep and rugged Maynard Burn Trail. He failed to show up after the hike as planned, and family reported him missing to the authorities. During the search, a Bell 205A1 rescue helicopter crashed, killing 3 people and injuring 5 at the 5,000-foot level of Mount Baldy, 20 miles south of Port Angeles. And anyway, by a few weeks later, they said that because of the snow, there was just no way to find him. And they said if he was walking around up there, we would have found him by now. And the final note of the story is, unfortunately, John Devine was never found. Another strange disappearance in the Olympic National Park. All right. So what we have here, and I know there's a couple of other stories of people who had disappeared, but we're not going to talk about them right now because basically the time is getting short. But we really want to talk about some of the ways that these missing people have qualified for the 411, David Paulides missing category. And the first fact, of course, is that they were never found. And another thing that is very interesting about Olympic Mountain disappearances is that there's nothing found. There's no shoes, there's no clothing, there's no nothing. And the other aspect of that is that when these creatures, there's multiple witnesses, there are multiple encounters, and there is physical, tangible evidence. In fact, somebody who has commented on the Bigfoot politics video has said, I just wrote a book about that. So look in the comments and click on the link and get his book. But all of these people have published books about the physical evidence of DNA that has been found in the Olympic Mountains. And yet nobody is saying anything about their Bigfoots up there being a possibility. So the last thing that I want to talk about, and I really had hoped that my counterpart Zack my house is so dusty. I'd hoped that my counterpart Zack had come on because I really wanted to talk about some of the things that, there's, as we said, 3.3 million people visit these parks. And this is per year, there were 2 disappearances in 2006 within a very short time of each other. And then the other one was 2013. So these are sporadic. But the question is, why are they not, being named? Why are people not looking into them as a possibility of the suspect? And I think that the reaction of these teachers who basically tried to tell their students that it was a black man, not only was that very racist, what are those students going to do? Would you believe anybody after that? You saw something with your own eyes, but then these people, and what was their motivation for trying to cover up the story up? So there's a lot of things that, we've talked about today that are very, very peculiar when it comes to the Olympic Mountains, Bigfoot, and these disappearances. Now, the last thing that we need to look at, because this is what we do on Encounters USA, is let's look at the evidence of what we're looking at. First of all, the victims, all male, not all young. Two of them were young. One was, there are two 20-year-olds, 20, 22, 47, and I think 74 for John Devine. So we have all males. Now, when you talk about David Paulides talks about, well, these people were mentally challenged, they were weak, whatever. All of these people, to a T, were all very strong, fit people. So what was it that drew the Bigfoot to them? Well, we don't have a lot of information about really anybody except for our Gilbert Mark Gilman disappearance. We do have information about him that he was playing loud music. He was wearing a very bright colored shirt and clothes, and he was wearing flip-flops. So as he's going through, he's making a lot of noise, and he really, really stands out. Now, what else is he doing? He's also taking pictures. And if we've seen anything from the David Paulides incidents, then we know that people that disappear often have cameras on them. So he was very fit, and the only thing that you could say about him was that his eyesight wasn't very good. And maybe that led to his downfall. Maybe he ran into something that he shouldn't. He mistook for something else, or he ran into these things and thought they were people or something. So it's a very strange disappearance. But the fact that the Olympic Mountains have had so many disappearances, and I grew up in Sequim. I can't say this enough. I had never heard anything about Bigfoot when I was growing up, and I certainly never heard about people disappearing. And now my friends, family, people I knew were loggers and people who spent a lot of time in the woods, Boy Scouts going out in the woods, hiking and camping, just growing up in the general area. And then not to mention all the parties and keggers and everything else that happened when you grew up in a small town in Washington State. And you're out in the woods a lot, and nobody ever encountered anything like this. Now, given we certainly weren't looking for it, but it was something that was certainly new to me when I found out about it. So those are our victims, but we still haven't really identified why they would have made themselves so. Made themselves a victim or made themselves so attractive. And the only thing that we can really say that they all have in common, other than them being male, and I believe they were all Caucasian white, is that they were all by themselves. They weren't with anybody else. And so then maybe it was just a target of opportunity. Maybe it was a combination of things. Who knows? But we do know that these people ended up missing, never to be heard from again. And all they are is a subject of strangeoutdoors.com and subject in David Paulides' book. And other than that, nobody's looking into why these people disappeared and what actually happened to them. So it's a very, very, very interesting story. It's a very peculiar situation. And if you want to make any comments, if you would like to discuss the Olympic Mountains, if you'd like to discuss an encounter you had in the Olympics, we'd certainly like to hear it. So please contact us at EncountersUSA, #1 gmail.com, because we certainly would love to hear more encounters from the Olympic Mountains. All right. The upcoming, I just want to tell you guys that I want to say, give a shout to Tony. Sorry you couldn't make it, man. Tony and Diet they're both students, and they are always busy with classes or work or whatever other things they have going on. So sorry Tony couldn't make it this time. We'll catch Tony on the next podcast, and I want to bring your attention. It's the 4th of July tomorrow, so everybody have a happy 4th, and thank God for this great country and for the men who made the 4th of July possible. We also want to remind you that we're going to start investigating Maury Island. If you don't know anything about the Maury Island UFO encounters, it's really an amazing topic. It goes into the Men in Black, and it goes into counterintelligence people, mysterious plane crashes, people tied to the JFK assassination, mysterious religions, all kinds of crazy stuff, and even Steven Spielberg. So you don't want to miss that next podcast. And hopefully we can get Tony and we can get Diet to be on the podcast, and hopefully I'll schedule it on the right day so that can happen. All right, everybody. Well, if you haven't subscribed, please do so if you like this content. And if you're interested in the topic, again, please leave comments in the description or in the comment section on YouTube. Listen to it. You can listen to this podcast on all your favorite podcast networks. So with that, now that we've talked about Bigfoot missing 411 in the Olympic Mountains, I want you guys to remember, when you're out in the woods, especially if you're out in the Olympics, always watch your back. Thanks for listening to tonight's show. Please remember, if you've had an encounter, we want to hear about it. Go ahead and email us at encountersusa1@gmail.com or contact us at encountersusa.com, our website, and go to the contact form. All right, everybody. Until next time, be careful out there. And if you're out in the woods, watch your back.